On behalf of the United Nations system in India, as representative of the UN Secretary General, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here with all of you, to greet and thank the government of Meghalaya, the Ministry of External Affairs, G20 Secretariat colleagues, members of parliament from Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, other representatives of the international community, Ambassador of Mexico, and the youth, young people in the audience. I'm very pleased to say, Kumno Filong, Namengama, Kamnu Chait Hipi. Namaskar. It's my first time to be here in the Northeast, actually. So what a wonderful place to begin my Northeast journey here in Meghalaya. I understand it's known as the abode of the clouds, which I think is immediately obvious why. I think I've also heard the nature's garden, the place where clouds come to rest, other beautiful phrases. And just in the drive up here, in this first couple of hours, I think one is completely stunned and impressed with the beauty and the nature and the biodiversity. So I want to thank the government of Meghalaya, the ORF colleagues, the T20 Secretariat, for bringing us all here together. I know I just missed my dear friend Samir Saran. I think we were like two ships passing in the night. I was hoping to be here a little bit earlier, but had a pretty good reason. I was putting the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed of the UN onto a plane in Bengaluru. She was completing 3 days visit here in India, and I can say it was a smashing success, and the Deputy Secretary General greatly appreciated and recognized and learned about India's leadership on the global stage at this incredibly important moment. So I think that, you know, to be here discussing these two vitally important streams, women-led development and green growth, it's hard to think of a better place to be than in India and then here in Shillong. I know that we also have some famous recognized traditions, the Jingking Jri, living bridges, which are included in the tentative UNESCO World Heritage List, and exemplifying this traditional, ancient tradition, let's say, of harmony with nature, of reverence for and stewardship of ecosystems, which seem to have been forgotten somewhere along the way in much of the world as we industrialized, and now is being so much again appreciated as vital for our human survival. So many great examples of that here in this state, from the nature banks to the Carbon Farming Act, modern articulations of ancient traditions that we are somehow rediscovering in many parts of the world. So I think, friends, you know, we find ourselves now in a very difficult moment globally, a moment of cascading crises. The polycrisis, as I think is sort of a new term of the year, unfortunately, from conflict to debt distress, food insecurity, and ongoing challenges of gender inequality. And all of this is coming against the backdrop of the triple planetary crisis: biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change, the truly existential threats. So we see for the very first time ever, progress on the Sustainable Development Goals is slowing in some areas and actually declining in others. We are told that globally, this past Monday was the hottest day ever on record. And though we may not feel it here in the cool of Shillong, I'm sure when many of us go home, we will recognize the frightening thought that our future selves in the very near future will look back at the very hottest days today and remember them as being relatively cool. What does that mean for us if we don't take action? So to see states like Meghalaya on the front lines of the impact of the triple planetary crisis, it's so encouraging to see them also on the front lines of innovation and taking action. Across the world, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be in the high-income countries. Places like Switzerland, mountain communities in the Alps are scrambling to imagine a life and livelihoods without snow in the Alps. This is a humanity-wide challenge. So there are reasons to be optimistic. There is good news also, and I wish to focus on two. First is that we do have the solutions at hand. We know the path. It's a matter of speed. And that is that the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, remain our best and our only global blueprint for peace and prosperity. And at the same time, India gives much reason for optimism, both here at home and internationally. With the greatest youth generation, more young minds than any country has ever had to tap before. One of the fastest growing economies. Incredibly ambitious commitments on climate. The Panchamrit commitments, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy. Huge investments from the private sector, hundreds of billions of dollars of Indian investments in the private sector in renewable energy, in electric mobility, and other areas. And again, states across the country pushing the envelope forward. And I wasn't here, but I understand the intervention of the Chief Minister Sangma was truly inspirational, and I had the chance to meet with him just before coming here, and was really, really inspired by the vision that Meghalaya has to navigate some of these tough challenges. Countries and states must live up to the right to development. But when leaders recognize the need to do that in a sustainable, renewable, circular way, this is what it's all about. Because as we approach the halfway to the 2030 agenda, we are looking forward to the Global SDG Summit in New York in September. India's leadership and presidency of the G20 could not have come at a more difficult but a better time to have a country such as India able to bring communities and countries together across different divides, north, south, east, west, you name it. And India has put UN priorities and UN values at the forefront of the G20 process. So aligned with the SDGs, in fact, I like to call it an SDG20 presidency. Whether you look at the emphasis on just green transitions, you look at the Green Development Pact, the G20 SDG Acceleration Action Plan that India has put forward. You look at the Prime Minister's Life Initiative that has been mainstreamed throughout all of the working groups, all of the streams for the G20, lifestyles for the environment. And prioritizing women-led development, not development of women, but women leading development of communities and of countries, also mainstreamed. This is so vitally important, and I thank the G20 Secretariat for that. I know we have my very dear colleague Inam Gambhir here today as well, but wish to truly thank the work. It's not over, still a little bit of time to September, and then there's that handshake where the Global SDG Summit in New York will happen literally 8 days later. So really, India will, in a way, be bringing a prepared meal to the table when the world sits to take stock of where are we and what do we need to do to keep moving forward. Now, the issue of gender equality or gender inequality remains so key. And at one level, it seems a little bit ridiculous to have to still be talking about that. There's no model of any economic growth. There's no model of any enterprise management or any type of administrative organization where anybody could ever think that they're going to get maximum results by underutilizing half of the human resource capital in that formula. Yet women's voices and leadership perspectives and experiences still too often remain marginalized, even as women tend to bear a greater brunt of the impact of climate crises. If we look at the COP27 last year, there were 110 world leaders there. How many were women? 7. 7 out of 110. Who thinks that we're getting the best deal out of our potential with numbers like that? And less than 1/3 of the official negotiating teams were women. Some of the teams that countries put forward to somehow bring the best of our human experiences were over 90% men. It doesn't make sense. And even as tremendous new opportunities arise in green growth, renewables, and nature-based solutions, what we're talking about here today, we see that many of the sectors that are targeted in this conversation, energy, construction, research, technology, industry, remain male-dominated. So we must find ways and find them fast to leverage women's skills in equal participation in climate decision-making in the green economy. And we already know, the evidence has been very, very clear, that wherever we achieve, or as we move forward towards parity, towards gender equality, that has produced the single greatest multiplier, the single greatest return on investment for aspirations of all of us, boys and girls, men and women, communities, companies, nations. As the Secretary General says, gender equality is the unfinished business of our time. Now, this requires bringing together these streams, sustainability in the economy and gender equality, requires specific concrete actions. I had the opportunity to participate in the W20 summit just a few weeks ago and appreciated the communiqué that was agreed by the G20 there with some strong and specific recommendations on how to gender the dimensions of climate action, including guaranteeing, first of all, that women have equal voice and seats at the table in the decision-making at the COP process, COP28 coming next, and committing financing, sufficient financing for loss and development funding, for adaptation, bringing a balance that we now understand it cannot just be mitigation. We have to invest equally on adaptation because vulnerable communities are being impacted each and every day. The good news also, dear friends, as the ILO tells us, is that as we move to a low-carbon economy, greener economies, this is about job creation. We can increase the number of new jobs by 60 million annually in just a few years' time. And this includes expanding livelihood opportunities also for women, many of them, all women, including farmers, those in the informal economy, the care economy that we cannot forget about, and building the green economy. Primary sectors like agriculture, forestry, energy are expected to be the biggest beneficiaries of a transition to a low-carbon economy and could raise the proportion of jobs for the country and also for women, decent jobs, high value-added jobs, higher income jobs, and formal jobs. And the emergence of new sectors and industries in the green economy, in the blue economy, being driven by digital transformations and frontier technologies like AI, This is all part of the digital public goods story, closing the digital divide, in which, again, India's leadership has been so vital, presenting to the world digital public infrastructure, the JAM Trinity, achieving incredible financial inclusion, also for women. We have seen the results as we move towards gender equality, and they're astonishing. We saw in COVID, some of the most effective responses to COVID were by countries with women heads of state and heads of government. And the same goes for renewable energy sectors. The same goes for peace and security, where when women are at the table, whether it's negotiating peace deals, whether it's in peacekeeping, where India is also a leader. India has provided UN peacekeeping with the very first all-women peacekeeping units, that the results are better and longer lasting. I've seen so many powerful examples of this playing out as I've had the honor to travel across the country and to meet with so many communities and see youth as well taking charge, leadership, overcoming barriers. For example, a wonderful intervention together with SEVA, with Renew Energy, with the UN Environment Program, just one example, where together we are providing the women salt pan workers in the Ran of Kutch with the training to be able to transition into the solar power energy sector to help repair solar panels, maintenance, and different types of job occupations, healthier, higher paying, and already transitioning into this wonderful green developed future. And there's so many other examples like that. There was some discussion earlier about bringing youth into the equation. How can we do that? This is at the very core of what the United Nations is attempting to do through partnerships. Here in India, we have so many different streams. There's Yuva, there's Tide Turners, there's the PAGE, Partnership for Action on Green Economy. And this is a central part of our brand new UN Government of India Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, our two-way partnership agreement for the next 5 years, 23 to 27. This is what will be the game changer. As India brings 1 million new young people, 1 million new young minds into the economy each and every month, the results of harvesting, of leveraging that demographic dividend and that gender dividend is hard to imagine how quickly this will help the country move forward and attain the goal of becoming a developed country, high-income country by 2047. So to conclude, dear colleagues, certainly the climate crisis, addressing this existential crisis, and overcoming gender inequality, these are the two greatest development challenges, not just in India, not just in the region, across the world. And yet, as we come together through interactions like this that drive further partnerships moving forward, as we come together, we create a confluence of two great rivers of optimism, in fact, that will take us forward to a brighter future. And again, because of my privileged position being based here in India, I see how India is a great source of this power, of this flow, through the immense natural capital in states like Meghalaya, and human resources, especially young people, women and girls included. I think we can and we should be optimistic. Kuble Shibun, Mitala, Bahat Dhanyavad.